Well, with cancer patients, the reason we see such dramatic results when they drink this whole fruit mangosteen juice is that this juice has the ability to promote apoptosis. Now, apoptosis is, I think of it as the whole process of the orderly growth, maturity, and death of cells. If healthy cells did not die, then there'd be new cells would come to replace them, but they would wind up being just overpowered by these cells that had lost their ability to die. So the cancer cell is just that. It's a cell that has lost its ability to die. It's the cell that's going to live forever, and it will parasitize everything around it. It's going to grow and metastasize and eventually kill off the organism. So isn't it amazing that the active components in this whole fruit mangosteen can induce apoptosis? And they do it very dramatically. The last time I got onto PubMed.gov, which was probably a month ago, I found there were 1,434 studies on xanthones, which are the active ingredients in the mangosteen. And I do believe there were about, 60 studies on the mangosteen, which is the fruit from which which is the fruit that has the most abundant quantity of known xanthones in nature. It's the only fruit that has such an abundance of xanthones. So, so I would say, and these studies I find them very impressive. I would say they're landmark studies. The study that showed that a particular xanthone could actually induce or reduce inflammation quite effectively in C6 rat glioma cells. To me, that's so exquisitely important, because these were nerve cells, first of all. So that leads me to the conclusion, and I'm extrapolating that if a person were to drink the juice that contained the whole fruit and all of the rind in it, then that person might find some good effects in terms of reducing inflammation in the nervous system. And what conditions might be benefited? Well, let's start with migraine headache. Let's also add ADD and ADHD. Autism spectrum disorder. Is ADHD and autism spectrum disorder, both of these conditions are thought to be associated with a certain degree of inflammation in the nervous system, as well as in the intestinal tract, as a matter of fact. And this helps on that level, too. There are studies that show potent antihistamine effect, the kind of antihistamine effect that would help reduce the inflammation in the intestinal tract, as a matter of fact. There are studies that show potent effect on certain lines of breast cancer cells, and the latest that I found was quite fascinating was a study that compared an extract of the mangosteen to methotrexate as an agent that might help to be used with colon cancer, a certain line of colon cancer. Now, the interesting thing about this study, this was a lab study, a cell study. However, isn't that what oncologists, the cancer doctors look to these lab cell studies to see if they can conduct small clinical trials on actual cancer patients? And what they've already determined by their studies is that methotrexate is one of the most potent chemotherapy agents against colon cancer, a certain type of colon cancer. So this study took, in the test tube, it took these cancer cells. There were 3 groups. One set of cancer cells was exposed to 1 millimole of this methotrexate, and there was a significant reduction in the cancer cell growth. I'd say, I'm just remembering this, in maybe not the exact number, but about 50%. The next group of cancer cells, colon cancer cells, was subjected to about the same, a millimole of this mangosteen extract. And They didn't state, I didn't read in the abstract just how much suppression of cancer growth there was, but there was a significant amount of cancer growth with that. And then the third test tube, they placed a half the amount of both of those agents, half the amount of methotrexate and half the amount of this extract of the mangosteen together into that tube with the cancer cells. And there was significant increase in cancer cell die-off. So think about that. This is just so enormous. The implications that there should be that you need less chemotherapy agent to get a better result. So I think that can be applied in clinical studies, and we need to look at that. I asked my colleagues to look at that both in a setting where they can start doing some studies on it, but even on the day-to-day, patient contact, office contact, hospital contact. I truly wish that more of my colleagues would look into suggesting the whole fruit mangosteen as a